Hello, and welcome to a special football-themed bonus episode of Allegedly Astrology. Dana, what are we covering on this extra cool and special episode?
Today we're talking with astrologer Ricky Williams about his life and career and some Super Bowl predictions.
Hell yeah. Welcome, Ricky. We're so glad to have you on this podcast. And if you guys don't know, Ricky is a former NFL player and Heisman Trophy winner. He's the founder of the Leela Astrology app. We use it. We love it. Highly recommend you download. He's also a cannabis entrepreneur, but most importantly, he's an astrologer. He's been studying astrology for about 18 years, so we're so happy to have his wealth of knowledge on this podcast. So, Ricky, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and most importantly, your big three?
Oh, yeah. So I'll start with the big three.
Yeah.
So I have a Gemini sun. My moon is in Cancer in the 10th house. The sun is in the 9th house. And I'm a Virgo rising. And so it's interesting. I like to tell my story through the astrological lens because that's how I really came onto astrology. I was playing football. I was a pretty good football player. And I had this moment in my life where I was thinking, is this really what I want to be doing with my life? And when I sat down and asked that question, it felt like, no, this isn't it. And so I ended up walking away in the middle of my career and traveling around the world, 9th house, Gemini sun. And this is before I knew anything about astrology, but something told me, like, I need to travel. I need to see things. And as I traveled around the world, I had this awareness that I don't have a skill. You know, Virgo rising, that I've been playing football my whole life. I don't have a skill. And then I started reflecting in my life and thinking, well, what do I want to do with my life? Because then that'll help me understand what skills I need to develop. And as I reflected, I thought, the thing that makes me feel best is giving people useful perspectives that help them feel better. And I was like, healer. Cancer moon in the 10th house.
Of course.
Yeah. And so again, all of this before I found astrology. And then when I found astrology, I saw that all these things that were going on in my mind, they were right here the whole time. And it just blew my mind that I became obsessed with trying to understand how this all works.
Wow. And so how did you find your journey? Obviously I'm sure you started self-taught, but did you have a mentor? Like, how did you what path did you take to learn about astrology in a deeper way?
Yeah. So continuing with my story, when I came back from my travels, I looked online to see if there was any place I could study alternative healing. And there's a school for Ayurveda up in Grass Valley, California. And so I enrolled in that class, and part of the school was we had a yoga teacher from the local ashram come and teach us asanas in the morning. And after the first yoga class, I was like, I got to get more of this. I said, where can I take more of these classes? And she said, come to the ashram. We teach every day. So that following weekend, I went to the ashram, and the head person at the ashram was an astrologer. She's a Vedic astrologer. And someone had told her there's a football player here. So after the yoga class, Swami Sita, she came up to me and she said, "Where's your Mars?" And I looked at her and I said, I don't know. I said, I don't know what you're talking about. And so she said, "Do you know what time you were born?" And I have a twin sister, so it's part of our story.
So I was like, yeah. A Gemini who's a twin?
Oh my God.
Wow, so literal.
Yeah, it's real. Yeah. And so we had this amazing conversation about me, And I was like, this woman who's from a different culture, who doesn't know anything about football and anything, she's seen me more clearly than anyone that I've known my whole entire life. And so she became my teacher, and she started to not only teach me yogic philosophy, but she started to teach me astrology. And it's interesting that I started learning Vedic astrology. And Vedic astrology is so much connected to mythology. I even traveled to India, visited temples, because in India, South India, they have temples to all the planets.
Yeah.
So I had this really deep, traditional, imprinting around astrology. And it's more intuitive, And then I met a Vedic astrologer who used the Western zodiac. And I started to I really liked him, so I started to play with his techniques. And I started looking at the Western zodiac more, and it just started to sing. And it was like a week later, I dropped the Vedic zodiac, and I've been a Western astrologer ever since. But the one place where I found the overlap between Vedic and Western astrology is the use of the nodes. Because there's something about Vedic astrology and the nodes that really spoke to my heart, like deeply. And when I got over, was thinking, really reading more just Western astrology, that there was something missing. There was some soul missing. And then I found Stephen Forrest in his evolutionary astrology, and he leans heavily into the nodes. And I started training with, this is answering your question, I started training with Stephen. And the first class I took with Steve is he did his nodal interpretation class. And for him, he connects nodes to past lives. Ooh. And to see him like vibe with the symbols, talking about the nodes, I mean, he was channeling some stuff. It was so profound, and it gave me so much insight into myself that I was like, this is it. And so I've been following. I'm a groupie. I've been following Steven ever since.
That's awesome. I love that. Also interesting, not to skip too far ahead, that you being a Virgo rising and with your Mercury in Taurus, that you've had such a physical sort of introduction to astrology. You were studying sort of like amongst the origin of it. I like that a lot.
Also, the Mercury's in the 8th house, and true story. Even before all of this, I was sitting on the beach. I lived in South Beach. I was right on the beach reading. I was reading a book, and I had this like insight that so many things around us, music, movies, all they felt at the time to me so superficial. And I had this deep insight that they all must come from like somewhere where they actually meant something at some point in time. And I think that curiosity led me to, I remember a couple of months later, I was in the bottom of a 2,500-year-old temple in India, and it was all in front of me, the dance, the music, and I was like, oh, okay, I get it. So I've always had that curiosity to like have a felt experience of what lies underneath.
That's very cool.
Well, I think coming back to what I said about my Mercury is for me, like, I want to get to the bottom of the core principles. And to me, at the bottom of the core principles of all astrological systems are the planets. And that's where there's the most agreement, about what we mean when we say Venus or Mars.
For sure.
And everything else is just how do you understand, how do you make sense of the way these core energies dance? And so the other systems, again, I think that's art, but the true science for me is in understanding the planet.
Cool.
Wow. Well, I want to get into a little bit to talk about your retirement chart. And we're very excited about this because we've never had, a true celebrity chart that we can look at and then actually talk to the person whose chart we're speculating on. And so I know allegedly astrology doesn't have a ton of sports fans, but if you listen to our Manti Te'o episode, you know how good you have to be to win a Heisman Trophy, even though he didn't win it. But we talked about what a big deal even being nominated for a Heisman Trophy is. Ricky was a Heisman Trophy winner, and he, was an amazing football player. And he kind of shocked the NFL with a semi-abrupt retirement. Would that be correct?
Yes. Yeah. It's an understatement.
It's an understatement, So it was a very shocking. You were, rushing over 1,000 yards, right? And you decided at that time that you wanted to walk away. But that wasn't your final retirement of the NFL, but it was a pretty big deal. And so we'd love to hear about your perspective on it, obviously from, your personal experience, but also, we would love to look at the charts at that time.
Yeah. So, as an astrologer for 18 years, I can't separate my personal experience from what's going on astrologically. If that makes sense, because it's
perfect sense.
It's the lens through which I view the world. There's not a lot of people who have studied astrology that long, who have had such intense life experiences and have been so passionate to make sense of them and have had the tools and the free time to be able to do it. So it gives me a unique perspective, because every time we go back and we remember something in our past, it stores in our mind as a different memory, because every time we go back and think about it, we have new insight based on the life's experiences. Right? As a kid, we go through certain experiences, and as we look back as adults, it's not as heavy as it was as a kid, and we can realize, we can understand what our parents were going through. We just have more insight. But when you have astrology as an addition to that lens, you get clear. Because to me, it's like the planets are always playing. And it's not like astrology is outside of who we are. And the more I understand astrology, I realize it's just the planets playing. And so even when I told the story of sitting in the locker room, talking to my friends, and the thought popped into my mind, is this really what I want to be doing with my life? Like that was my lived experience of it. And if I look astrologically, I was going through a progressed lunar return, and my moon is in the 10th house, and I have a Cancer moon in the 10th house. And the universe, and I'm an evolutionary astrologer, so the universe is saying part of my evolutionary journey is moving towards becoming a healer. Moon in Cancer in the 10th. And at that time in my life, my progressed lunar return, which makes me more sensitive to am I on the right path, that's what happened. I realized I wasn't. And then as the story played out, and again, I didn't know anything about astrology, I ended up in Grass Valley studying to become a healer. And so when I look at the astrology of it, and I look at my lived experience of it, I don't see that they're different.
That's pretty amazing, honestly. Well, we pulled the chart for that first retirement, is what we'll call it, the shocking retirement. Dana, what do you see in Ricky's chart?
Your birthday is the day before mine, which is exciting for me. The North Node is conjunct his natal Mercury, which is his chart ruler. So that's just putting you in the right spot for where you're supposed to go, especially, like, that's insane. Don't you think? I mean, and then the South Node conjunct your natal Uranus. It's like, okay, you're completely knocked off your path. You're on your nodal. Well, your nodal opposition hadn't completely started, but in the Placidus there, it's right in the same houses, or in the, reverse houses, in the 2nd and the 8th. And I feel like with the 8th being so much about death, both real and proverbial, and like terms of transformation, that's right on. Your progressed Venus was already past your natal Mercury, which in some ways I always feel like in progressions, to me, when a progressed planet is like past the exact, I feel like that's almost like the person knows they've already outlived that story in their life in some way. So even you sitting there in the locker room asking it, it's something that probably was, in some ways, if you hadn't thought it before, it's like that impulse is living in your body. It's just the first time the thought manifests.
Yeah. Also, there's progressed Mars is opposing my second house Uranus.
Also, I mean, even just the moon being on your natal Saturn that day, the fastest planet and the slowest traditional planet being conjunct is sort of, and the sun was there. It was right after a new moon. It looks like it was the same solar lunar phase on that day then as the one that you were born under.
Yeah. Sure was.
And then also with your progressed Mercury catching up to your natal Jupiter, like sort of like setting you free, especially in Gemini, letting you explore the curiosity that maybe isn't always available.
Yeah. So, I use really tight orbs.
Do you?
With progressions. I use like 1 degree orbs. I'll go to 2 degrees with Mars and the sun. So looking at the same chart, for me, one of the things that Stephen Forrest, that is like so profound is he calls it the breaking of the karmic wave. And the idea when transits or progressions, any kind of planetary stimulus affects either the South Node or the ruler of the South Node, meaning the planet that rules the sign the South Node is in, it has this deeper karmic effect. And so transiting Saturn at 18 degrees, okay, right, making a tight square to my natal Mars in the 8th, which is the ruler of my South Node. So this idea of the reality of old, past trauma, surfacing. And right as the Saturn enters the 11th house, the groups, people we associate ourselves with, I had that awareness in a locker room. These are not my people.
Yeah.
Crazy. Squaring the South Node. My South Node is in Aries, South past life, being a warrior. Okay, being a warrior, Saturn entered the 11th, waking me up to, is this really what I want to do again?
Right.
Again, I like that.
It's interesting because, like you said, you have sort of a chart of someone who wants to be a healer and heal people. And yet you found yourself in this warrior position playing this very violent sport. And I think we're all seeing more and more how violent the NFL is and the implications that has. So it's very interesting that you really wanted to do the opposite. But, I think it's very poignant of like, just because you're really good at something doesn't mean you need to do that.
Ooh, this is the lesson of the South Node.
Yeah.
Because especially a powerful South Node, I have South Node in Aries conjunct Mars. Okay, it's like this double symbolism, right? And conjunct Venus, so I probably was, loved for what I did.
You were loved for that. You were very well loved.
Exactly. So the South Node is the pattern that we've been doing over and over and over again, and so we have a gift, but if we keep leaning into that gift, it doesn't lead us anywhere.
Right.
We just stay in that same pattern, and it becomes empty. And so for me, especially when Mars or the South Node is triggered, these themes come up, and I have the ability to make a different choice.
Yeah, but that's pretty impressive. I mean, it's not just like, oh, I'm like kind of good at playing the piano. Like you had a lot of people wanting you to continue being good at this thing you were really, really good at. And so this was in 2004. All these realizations are sitting in this locker room. You're like, I need to retire. But you didn't end up retiring for good then. So what kind of drew you back? Would like to hear sort of the interim between that sort of big epiphany and then your actual retirement in 2012.
Yeah, it's textbook, because it all surrounds around the Mars and the nodes, right? And kind of how I started the story. And shortly after this time, I found myself here in Nevada County talking to Swami Sita, and the question she asked is, "Where's your Mars?" And so I remember sitting down and talking to her. And at that time, I thought there was no way I'm ever going back to play football. I was running away from my Mars. Okay. And the thing about the South Node, it can be problematic, but we can't escape it. It's a part of who we are. We just have to learn to use it differently. And so in that conversation, Swami Sita, she talked about the South Node, and she talked about the habit I had of creating stressful situations. And the thing about the South Node, it's so habitual, we don't even tend to think about it. But when she said that to me, I was like, oh, right? And also being with the yoga teacher and starting to learn from her, she introduced something called Dharma, that we all have a purpose. Okay. And so she helped me realize that I had a purpose in life, and it wasn't running away from the Mars. It was learning how to use it in a way that wasn't destructive, that was actually constructive. And you'll see a lot of healers have very powerful Marses, because in order to give that healing energy, you got to have some energy, right? Even if we think of doctors, right? Even the terminology, we fight disease, right? So healers, you need to have a strong Mars. If you don't have a lot of vitality as a healer, then you become diminished. And so for me, it's about turning the energy, because the ruler of my North Node is in Libra. The ruler Venus is right back in the 8th house in Aries, conjunct the Mars in the node. So I couldn't run away from it. I just had to change my orientation to it. And so when I came back a year later, I was a different person. And I was more conscious. I was realizing that I have this opportunity. I have a platform. I can use this to heal people. And so I've been able to transform my platform as a football player. So now I'm talking about cannabis and the way it opened my mind, and I can help open other people's minds, and it can bring this deep kind of healing. I'm talking about astrology, and the kind of astrology that I do. It's everything I do. It's healing astrology.
Yeah. Interesting. You're so ahead of your time, because I think a lot of those years in between your first and second were sort of marred a little bit by cannabis fines and stuff. And, I think it's unfortunately the rhetoric around marijuana then was not what it is now. So I'm sure it would have been a little bit different for you. But so you went back, obviously, you're like, I can use my Mars in a different way. Obviously, it affected you, in a lot of ways you were learning. But what led you to finally be able to leave the NFL for good?
I was ready. It was like the whole point of coming back was to kind of clear my name. So that I could rebuild, so that I could have a platform. Because the way I left the first time, it was just so dark that it would have been very difficult to rebuild a platform.
Yeah.
The easiest way is to come back, to clear my name, and then I have a platform. And so when I had my final game with the Ravens, that next week, I went to a class, and was learning about another class, Virgo, 9th house, Gemini, where I was learning another healing modality. And I just realized this is what I love to do, and I don't need to go back. And I had it's a second retirement, okay, that this date is, I had a conversation with Bill Parcells, who's someone I really really respected. And he epitomized football to me. And the message he sent to me was, you can contribute in other ways. Don't chase this thing too long. And that really hit me. And it kind of gave me permission to say, it's time to go on to the next chapter.
Beautiful.
Which is pretty amazing. And for those who don't know, Bill Parcells is a pretty legendary football coach, but it's pretty impressive for someone who's, his job is to be a football coach and, to not pressure you into doing something that, would have benefited, his job and stuff. So I think that's pretty interesting. And I think, now again, like with everything, like sort of LeBron's company talking about more than an athlete, again, like you were really at the forefront of trying to be more than an athlete. You were able to do something really unique and different. And, obviously you had a very strong pull for that. But I think not everyone would necessarily have the courage to sort of go that route. So that's really interesting. But I know, so Dana, you pulled the chart.
Yeah, I agree with everything Alicia said. I think that not everyone is a professional athlete. In fact, most people aren't, obviously. And so, but so many people I think can maybe connect to wondering like, hey, am I in the right thing? And for most people, the answer is, yeah, you are. Like, you'll just find little parts of your day, that to fill the parts of your, that are different. But I think that for some people, they really might not be in the right career, right? You had something that most people would find it so hard to walk away from. And I think that a lot of people, when I'm saying other than that, I think it's really inspiring altogether. So anyway, February 7th, 2012, the first thing I saw was that your progressed moon and progressed ascendant are conjunct in Libra in your second house. I like that. When you initially retired, I didn't say this before, but your progressed ascendant was conjunct your natal and progressed Pluto. And that does really speak to sort of what you just said. Like, it's sort of like leaving not necessarily on the best note. Finally, the moon catches up. Your moon is in such a beautiful spot in your natal chart. And it's sort of like this peaceful departure, especially in Libra. I mean, it was in Libra before, but Pluto, Libra is sort of like, I'm getting the fuck out of here. And then like once the moon is there, it's sort of like, all right, we can do this harmoniously. It's close to your north node. Saturn's also there too, transiting Saturn. Had just crept back in to make its last like little hurrah in Libra, and Saturn is exalted in Libra, where it's sort of like, all right, I can do this peacefully. Let me do this like for myself and for other people. And then you also have this thing that I love so much. Okay, so the transiting south node is exactly conjunct your natal Jupiter, and then Jupiter had just transited your natal south node, so that dual activation again. And so then I have to think, like, you've talked so much about the south node. That's so interesting to me that's showing up. I mean, transiting Jupiter's in Taurus and his natal south node is in Aries. So within the past year, that would have happened where the Jupiter and the south node were in your reverse signs in your natal chart, being Aries and Gemini. Again, to sort of like release yourself from this story you've told yourself, especially with Jupiter and Gemini. I think that you can get sort of stuck in stories. I mean, I have Jupiter and Gemini, so does Elise. And it's sort of like the stories that we tell ourselves about ourselves. It's like we don't have to believe them if we know they're not true anymore.
It's what my therapist tells me all the time.
Hey.
So
it's true, but I think that one of the things about I've learned to honor things instead of defend against them, because to me, when you honor the stories, you realize when they're over, because every story, right, there's an ending. And so if you honor the whole story. So as I look at this date, my progressed Jupiter, it was at 18 degrees, can still conjunct my midheaven, making a square to my ascendant. And so this idea of ready for something more, ready for something bigger, ready for something greater, it's time. Also, and you mentioned like this letting go, okay, transiting Neptune in the 6th, letting go of work, okay, transiting Neptune, moving through the 6th, making a square to my natal sun. 9th house, I'm ready for something different, ready for a new adventure, letting go of this role. And in the end, you nailed it. I think the progressed moon and the progressed ascendant, okay, opposing the rulers of my nodes, both of my nodes, okay, this major opportunity to move from the Aries to the Libra. It's time.
It's time.
And the beautiful thing about evolutionary astrology is we look at everything occur. Life happens for us, not to us. Something triggers in your chart is because it's time for this part of you to evolve. It's time. It's time for a change.
I like that.
I like that too. I also feel like, so both retirement charts have the moon in Leo, where your natal Saturn is. And if any any two planets were to like equate to the sentence "it's time," it would be the Moon and Saturn.
Well, I like that you talked a little bit about like, obviously you got a lot of clarity about your career path and, but astrology has obviously led you to have a greater understanding of relationships. And, I think we have a lot of, obviously women are very drawn to astrology for many reasons, and men kind of poo-poo it for a better, lack of a better term. And so like, how do you feel that, men can kind of, what do you think they're missing out on by kind of not really looking into astrology? Obviously not everyone has to study astrology in the way that you have, but what do you feel like people, men especially, who may or may not be listening to this episode, can learn from astrology?
Well, I mean, the first thing that comes to mind is the idea that, men typically like associate with liking power, and we have this idea of knowledge is power. I feel like since the more I study astrology, my IQ just keeps going up because I understand things better. I'm less surprised because I have a knowledge of how things work. So I think the root thing that's keeping people from really appreciating what astrology can offer is faith. Because to me, as a ninth house sun conjunct Jupiter, I have this drive, trine Pluto. I have this drive to understand. I grew up in a very religious family, and so just in the core, there is some belief that we live in a meaningful universe, and I think that drive to like find out, like I look around and I don't see that any proof that we live in a meaningful universe, and so I just kept looking and looking and looking, and when I found astrology, it was the first thing that fit, that there's a possibility that this could help prove that this is a meaningful universe. And the more time and energy I've put into understanding and learning how to interpret the symbols, that it's paid off because I have a greater sense of appreciation and understanding. And it's a faith that's not built in belief. It's built in, every day when I talk to people about their charts and I'm looking at a two-dimensional diagram and explaining, talking about the symbols, and I see not that it's right or accurate, but I see how meaningful it is in helping them connect to themselves and their own life's journey. That's all the proof that I need.
I love that.
Dana, I sent Dana like a quote from an astrology book that I stumbled upon this weekend, and it's from an astrologer. They explain it that originally astrology was not separate from astronomy. They were sort of like two wings of the same butterfly, like left brain, right brain, and just like a more symbolic way of looking at things. And it's really meant to help you realize your connection to the cosmos and learn about like the cycles that occur both in nature and our lives. It's sort of like implying that what's going on in the heavens mirrors what's happening on Earth. And if we can sort of understand the cycles of these planets and we can understand how that applies to the cycles in our lives. And, I think people think of astrology as just like, oh, it's like you're telling the future or I have no say in my destiny. But it's not like a, determinative map where you have no choice, right? You look at a map all the time and you can decide where to go, but you kind of co-create with the planets. And that's really like resonated with me of like, people kind of assume that astrology is this like blind belief in just like whatever is going to happen is going to happen. But you have a choice, right? And you're not it's a certain things maybe are predetermined, but not like you have a choice in how you respond to those things.
Something a lot of clients come to me with is asking like what signs are bad for me? What signs should I be looking for in terms of dating other people? And I feel like, my number one goal is to like relieve certain anxieties, especially for ones that like I've already lived through so other people don't have to experience them. Which is just that at certain times in your life, you're going to have relationship transits, and those are going to be times when you get into meaningful relationships, and the signs of those people that won't matter. It won't be like, those things aren't really within your control. You have to sort of, like Ricky says, like the planets are dancing, like you have to, go with it. That's how I think it, at least.
Oh yeah, I think it's beautiful. So what I started doing when I'm talking to people about their charts, because most of my clients are men who've never had any relation to astrology ever. And I do really deep astrology. So I'm having to like, how do I bridge this gap in an hour and a half to have a meaningful conversation where we both feel like we got something from it? And so I've had to think about how to introduce astrology to a newbie. And it's cool because to me, we hear people say, in order to be happy in a relationship, I have to first be happy with myself. I have to love myself. I have to have a good relationship with myself. Okay. But what does that really mean? And I think astrology takes us right to the core is, to me, you have to have a good relationship with your planets, because when you hear people say, I love this part about me, I don't like this part about me. Okay. Whenever you hear someone say that, you can look at the chart and you're going to see the square, the opposition, or the conflict that has them tied in knots. Okay. And if we're tied in knots with the part of ourselves, how do we think other people are going to experience that part of ourselves? And so, as with Leela, we started off Leela as really we're still aiming as a relationship app.
Yeah.
And I was excited at people if they can understand it. Not that certain signs are good for other signs. It's about if you understand yourself, then compatibility is a choice.
It's a choice.
And so we started off as thinking, how do we help people connect? But we realized we have to start with people's relationship to themselves, and specifically their relationship to their planets. And so the way we laid it out on my profile screen is really introducing people to the planets. And I think astrology is far too sign-based.
Yes.
I think if we can bring it back to the planets, because the planets are the forces inside of us. And if we understand them, right, and we appreciate their dance and their play, right, what sign they're in, what house they're in, what aspects they're making, what they're looking for, how we can co-create, how we can support the dance and the play, then again, life and relationships become playing. Right?
Yeah.
And we're trying to see, does this work? Does this work? Right? And we're not all in and then pissed off when it doesn't work. It's more of a question.
Compatibility is a choice.
Yeah.
The New York Post posted this thing of people who believe in astrology are have a lower IQ level and blah, blah, blah. And it's just obviously just clickbait shit. But it's, I think, do you think that sun sign astrology or horoscope astrology is detrimental to the practice?
I don't. I think if people get stuck there, it is. But it's an entryway. It's an entryway. Yeah. Another one of the things this past year that's really opened my mind is this idea that, because once you get into the astrology of the planets, especially if you're looking at the asteroids, it's a lot of information. And so as I'm trying to talk to someone, I'm helping them understand how to prioritize what's I call the planets the voices in our head. What's the loudest voice in your head, that you actually got to listen to first if everything else is going to be all right. And I found that in certain people, the sun is the quietest voice in their head. And these are people that when they read sun sign stuff, they're yeah, it kind of speaks to me because the sun is the center, but it's not the most dominant and the most powerful. So I think we lose people with sun sign astrology, and we can gain them if we make astrology more planet-based. Because I find when people understand what their strongest planet is, that it's more creative than the rigidity of the sun. Because the planets were the gods and the goddesses, and if you can identify to that creative side of yourself, that's, my wife calls it magic. That's when you co-create with the gods or with the planets or with the psychological forces, if you will. Well,
I hope that more men especially, but I think hopefully people go beyond sun sign astrology there's so much power in it. But I really love how the Leela app explains the planets. It's the best write-up of that I've seen on any of the astrology apps. So very excited for hopefully other people to download the app and learn more. But we kind of went through Ricky's 2 retirements and talked about astrology and his relationship with astrology. But we have, a Super Bowl coming up. And whether you're a sports fan or not, Super Bowl is very part of our culture. It's a cultural moment. And we not only have a former NFL player, but a seasoned astrologer on this podcast. So we have to ask you, talk a little bit about Super Bowl predictions and some of the key players. So we're going to talk about a couple things. So first, we're going to talk about Patrick Mahomes, who's the quarterback of the Chiefs. We're going to talk about Jalen Hurts, who's the quarterback of the Eagles, and that's also a historic matchup because it's the first time 2 black quarterbacks have faced each other in a Super Bowl. And then, we've another historic moment is we have 2 brothers playing each other in the Super Bowl. The Kelsey brothers, Travis Kelsey on the Chiefs and Jason Kelsey on the Eagles. And then we'll just talk a little bit about the teams, and then we have to give our audience just a brief snippet of what Rihanna's chart looks like because we're pumped that she's hopefully coming back. So we'd love to just do some top line looks at some of these key players, and then maybe make some predictions at the end. How do you feel about that?
Yeah, that sounds like a lot of fun.
All right, let's get into it.
Yes. So this year, for all you sports and non-sports fans that are listening, the Kansas City Chiefs are playing the Philadelphia Eagles, and Kansas City is no stranger to being in the Super Bowl the last few years. They won in 2020, they won again in 2021, but lost, and now they're back again in 2023. Their head coach is Andy Reid, who, a bit of tea on him, he used to coach for the Eagles, and their quarterback is Patrick Mahomes.
And Patrick Mahomes has been with the Chiefs his whole career. He's won a Super Bowl with them, was named Super Bowl MVP. And, he's really not playing around. At age 27, an age we talked about in this episode, is very profound. He's the only quarterback in history to throw for over 5,000 yards in a single season, which is a lot of yards.
A lot of yards. And he just signed a huge, fat contract. It was a 10-year contract extension totaling $503 million, which is a number I don't understand in my head. This contract is the third largest known contract in sports history. This is his third time going to the Super Bowl in 5 years. So what does this chart look like?
He was born on September 17th, 1995 in Tyler, Texas. We don't have a birth time. So I did a solar chart. But he's a Virgo sun and a Cancer moon, so Ricky has some stuff in common with him.
Interesting. Ricky does.
Cancer Moon Club. # respect.
He's also in his progressed lunar return, which is interesting and very cool. Good for him. So this is a time that's a big, significant time in his life. He's in his nodal opposition. Will start officially in July, but we're closing in on it. And something that I think is interesting, his natal Mars is dignified in Scorpio. His progressed Venus is closely conjunct. It's within a degree now. And that's where the transiting South node is. So I don't know, Ricky, you might have something more interesting than I have to say about this. This is more something that I just find, it doesn't rule his sun or his moon, but he has already it's interesting to me, so you have this dignified Mars, and then progressed Venus is not strong in Scorpio. Or, it's not technically strong, but it's going to have different sort of strengths. And I feel it's going to be getting really deep. It could be digging your heels in. The South node there could be sort of lowering defenses, which I don't know how to play football. I can watch it. The most significant thing to me is definitely that progressed lunar return. Also, his progressed Mercury is conjunct his progressed Chiron. But something interesting that I'll just say up top is that every single chart from here on out has stationing Mercury. So within one chart has it within 8 days, but everyone else has it within days or hours. So Mercury is very static in all these charts, and we just had Mars stationed direct within a month of the Super Bowl. It stationed on January 12th. The Super Bowl was on February 12th. So Mars in Gemini, Mercury ruled. So I think it's interesting that there's sort of this really frenetic Mercury and martial energy, because I feel Mars always gets pinned with being sort of the planet of athletes, and of course it is, but also Mercury is sort of that activity, that movement, that sort of almost neurosis of needing to move. So please take it away, Ricky.
Yeah. So, typically if I was talking to Pat, he came in, we were sitting down, we probably wouldn't even talk about the game. The first thing, it would be a deeper conversation. The first thing I'd talk about is the transiting Neptune opposing his sun. That's a major life event. So if I'm talking about his internal processes, I'm going to have one conversation, but this is about the Super Bowl. So it's a different conversation. And I think as a football player, what I see often, Tom Brady has this, I have this, the connections between Neptune and Mars. Okay, so I'm going to talk about Neptune and Mars. Neptune is the ability to use our imagination. Mars, battle. Okay, we can imagine ourselves being successful in battle. And I know my biggest games, my biggest performances, where I could imagine myself having those performances, and then I was able to go out there and execute. Okay, right. But if we're not handling Neptune right, then we have illusions, and we have disappointment. But we have access to both. Okay, and the fact that he's been so successful as an athlete, okay, that is an indication, right, that he's doing a good job with Neptune. So we can. So for me, this is a sign that would indicate some sort of potential wonderful performance because it's affecting his son, right? And as I'm saying that, I know that because I know in the back of my mind that transiting Jupiter, okay, on this day, is making a trine aspect to his natal Jupiter. Okay, and traditional astrology says, success, success, success. All right. So an indication there. Again, if I were having a more personal conversation, right, I would talk about the progressed moon, because right, the synchronicity of that's how we started the conversation, and here we are. And so this, and if I'm tying this to the game, right, this idea of I've done at a young age, okay, I've done everything that a football player can do. That feels a little bit like Neptune. Okay, feels a little bit like Neptune. As you can tell, just the energy I'm picking up from the chart is, I'm predicting, at least at this early in the interpretation, it looks like he's gonna have a good game.
All right.
It's a transiting Venus conjunct the Saturn.
Yeah.
Okay. And also you mentioned the progressed Venus.
Right.
Okay?
Yeah. Scorpio.
I mean, the progressed Venus conjunct Mars, right? This Venus. Okay. At least the idea of Venus, I feel comfortable in a stressful situation. Okay, cool and collected.
Venus and Mars is also together so much about battle and war. Like the conjunction, I think, was when Russia invaded Ukraine.
Oh, yeah.
Casual.
Next up, we're moving on to the Philadelphia Eagles, who are considered to be the favorite of the matchup. They were the top seed in the playoffs, and this is their 4th Super Bowl appearance.
Yeah, they last won in 2018. But their quarterback this time around is Jalen Hurts. He's 24. He's been with the team since 2020. So what's going on in his chart?
He was born August 7th, 1998, and he has a Leo sun and an Aquarius moon. He was actually born on a lunar eclipse in Aquarius, which is pretty tight.
Ooh, born on an eclipse.
Extreme life circumstances. And the eclipse was conjunct Uranus, so that's pretty cool. He's also in his Uranus square. It already completed, but by sign, it's still occurring. And he, like Patrick, has Mercury stationed in his chart. Mercury stationed retrograde 7 days before he was born at 28 degrees Leo, which is also where Venus will station retrograde later this summer. So in some circumstances, I wonder, will that... was that sort of like either predisposing him to like what hurts he will have, or what sort of, like maybe he'll come back with a chip on his shoulder because, he has like time to go over that sort of pain. He has Saturn opposing his sun. Saturn, and we're on the final leg of this Saturn in Aquarius. So all the lessons that he's learned, like they've pretty much compounded. They're in his body now. I feel like he'll probably go in calm and tempered, I would imagine. And Venus will also be transiting his natal Jupiter in Pisces. So his natal Jupiter is dignified. He has his natal south node there too. Interesting. His Neptune will be on his natal Jupiter, and the north node will be on his natal Saturn. So Saturn is really, I feel like this is a pretty Saturnian story, especially in fixed signs. It's going to be like, for better or worse, I guess, is maybe how I feel about Saturn a lot of time, especially in a fixed sign, because I'm a Leo rising. I don't want to change most of the time. Once it's happened, I'm glad. Is there anything that super sticks out to you, Ricky?
Just thematically, natally, the sun in Leo, the moon in Aquarius, conjunct Uranus. Okay, like just as a theme in the life. Okay, because I think of Leo is about performance or authenticity. That'd be like the need to be in charge, to be the lead. He's the quarterback. But there's situations where Aquarian, where you need to risk the possibility of upsetting your people. Okay, right. So I think there's an inner conflict of being what I'm supposed to be, right, or really trusting my intuition, right, and so just a theme in the life, okay, just a theme in the background, and right now currently transiting Uranus, okay, and I mentioned this earlier that when we have a natal aspect or a natal relationship between two planets, and those two planets are also involved in something that's going on currently, okay, that it's important, right? And so transiting Uranus, making a square to the sun, right? Again, we don't know the houses because we don't have the birth time. I'd definitely be curious to see what houses, but it's a test. I think of squares, oppositions, or tests, and it's a test that he's born to face, that he's going to have to face over and over again. Right, and my sense is there's going to be an opportunity in the game, because right on the large stage, the Leo stage, where he's going to have to make a decision about making everyone happy or doing what he knows is best.
Interesting.
That's tough.
Wild. It's also so interesting because he's in a first house year, so this year is about him and who he is in his own life, and that's sort of like what every year is like for a Leo in some regards. But with his sun in Leo, so the perfection from his sun, it's a solar year, and then from his moon, it's a Saturn year, and on this day, the sun will be applying in conjunction to Saturn in Aquarius, where Saturn is so strong. So it's sort of like really, it's so much like what you just said, sort of like that inner battle, or like what I have to do what I know is right, Saturn, or what other people expect of me. Or
even the transiting moon passing through Scorpio that day, triggering the Uranus and the sun. Perfect.
For kickoff at 4:30, the moon is has just perfected its opposition with Uranus. It's crazy to me. I guess I've never really looked at another Super Bowl chart, to be honest, but that one really seems like a Super Bowl.
So besides the quarterbacks, we also have a brother situation happening that Elise alluded to. The Kelsey brothers are playing against each other, and this is the first time that two brothers have played each other at the Super Bowl. The only other time was when two coaches, the Harbaugh brothers, played each other.
I was there.
Cute.
You were there.
Oh, cool.
I was hired by ESPN to photograph the game. So I was on the field with the camera taking pictures of that Super Bowl. Yeah.
You have many talents.
Gemini.
Yeah.
But yeah, so Travis is 33 and a tight end for the Chiefs. He's played with them his whole career since 2013. He's arguably the more famous brother just because he plays offense and gets to be the star a little bit. But also, we're just going to be honest, he's a little bit hotter. And Jason is 35, and he's the starting center for the Eagles. And he's been playing with them since 2011, and he's actually the highest paid center in the NFL. So even though he doesn't get as much spotlight as Travis, he's a very good player in his own right.
So the brothers are 2 years apart in age. They're super close, but they're also very competitive with each other. So what do their charts look like?
It's very Mars and Gemini for two brothers to be playing each other during the Super Bowl. They're the twins. Castor and Pollux.
Yes.
So I love that. And I guess their parents win and lose both either way, but that's very cool for a family to experience, I imagine.
Donna Kelsey is pretty much the star of the Super Bowl. That's their mom.
She flew around. She went to one game, then got on a plane and surprised the other brother after his game.
That's adorable.
Yeah.
So Travis is in a 10th house year. This year is big for his career. He was born October 5th, 1989. Again, we don't know what time. So he's a Libra sun and a Sagittarius moon. What up, Sagittarius Moon Club? So Mars is opposing his moon this day. That's good for physical activity. I mean, it's intense. I imagine that he will be able to feel it in his nerves and in his blood. Just with that sort of Gemini neurosis. Also, Jupiter is opposing his Mars. And something that I thought is interesting is that both him and his brother have Libra Mars. And he was born one day after Mercury stationed direct. So Mercury, again, is static in his chart and is stationed direct in Virgo. So it's strong. It's in its domicile and exaltation. It's able to sort of parse things out. It's in his 12th solar house, so can maybe see into what other people are thinking. It's a fun 12th house. I mean, we don't know his real houses, but if we're just doing solar, that's what that could be. And the sun and Saturn are on his north node. So in terms of his destiny, I don't work as much with the nodes. I use them more as transiting and knowing when something's going to happen. I would say this is it's almost interesting because it's okay, you're in the spotlight, but which way is it going to turn you? Or which way is it going to, is it going to be this sort of dignified victory, or is it going to be the disappointing time when you realize you're, a member of society? Not that he wouldn't think that every other day of his life. But his progressed Mars is also in Scorpio, so it could be gearing up. It could be really beefed. And his progressed Mercury is conjunct his natal Pluto. So this could be realizing things about yourself. I mean, realizing things about how far he's come. His progressed Sun is also conjunct progressed Pluto. So that's a lot of Pluto going on, or a little Pluto going on. It's also where the moon will be when kickoff is happening. Or is it the coin toss? When the game starts. I bet he'll just be, I would imagine this just when the game starts. This is, again, speculation, of course, but I imagine it's going to be just such an introspective and sort of moment of culmination, realization, sort of going into something.
Well, this would be a great This would have been a great time to have birth times, because then we could just focus. We could just focus on the third house.
Ricky, we should have had you tweet at them, because I feel like they would have responded to you. They would not have responded to us next time.
Honestly, I think we should start something, because I think together we can get a lot of information.
Yes,
2 Geminis.
So, the first thing that jumps out to me in Jason's chart is all the energy in Scorpio. His progressed Mars conjunct his Sun, Pluto conjunction, the transiting moon will be activating it that day. And also his natal moon is being affected there in Taurus. And so when I see all of this stimulation, it gets me excited about this is going to be like a major life event.
Wow. And they both have Super Bowl rings, right? Jason and Travis. So it's not like neither. So it's kind of interesting. It's like this is sort of like they're equal right now, but obviously one of them is going to walk away a winner. And people don't usually look at like defense charts, for the Super Bowl. I know last year it was really big on Twitter, like on Sean McVay's chart, who is the coach of the Rams, had some really big placements, or people look at quarterbacks like we do. But, it's interesting to look like he has a pretty lit up chart for the Super Bowl. So it's going to be a major event for him, just not as like he might not be as in the spotlight as his brother.
His sun is in Scorpio, his moon's in Taurus, so the eclipses are happening on both of his lights.
Yeah, and the progressed Sun conjunct Saturn, and progressed Sun trine the progressed Jupiter. Yeah, so it's a lot. So when I look at a contest, right? If you think of who has the most force, who has the most energy. So I look at charts like this. I say because it's a contest between 2 teams, and whoever has the most energy, the most force, is going to overcome the other.
Yeah. Wow.
And it's his Jupiter return.
Fun.
Oh, shit. Okay, so now we'll look really quickly. Obviously, like Ricky said, it's whoever brings the most collective energy. So we obviously looked at individual players, but we can look at the charts for the team. So, the Eagles were founded on July 8th, 1933. So Dana, do you want to just give a little top line about what the Eagles chart for the team chart looks at?
They have a Cancer sun and an Aquarius moon, so it's also a full moon phase, even though the sun and moon are in conjunct. They are currently in a 6th house year, so this year is all about work. And Mercury stationed retrograde 8 days after the founding of the team, which is the furthest out. Okay, so yeah, this is like my big fixation for this episode. I feel like I get in one every time, and it's really just these Mercury stationing in every chart. Saturn is on the north node of Saturn, and the sun will be conjunct the north node for the Phillies. So yeah, that could be like either way. It's sort of like this is going to be monumental.
The Philadelphia Eagles.
That's what I meant.
The Phillies are a baseball team. Right. Yes.
Gosh,
you guys know what Dana meant.
Their progressed moon is in Taurus. Interesting. That's exalted. So yeah, the moon's in Aquarius. Chiron is in Gemini, and Mars is in Libra for this July 8th, 1933 chart. So it's this air trine of Mars, the moon, and Chiron. So it's sort of Chiron and Gemini is very much a chip on your shoulder, maybe also about like what you're like secure about, what you feel, what you feel like you're allowed to like say. I don't know, maybe they'll be shit talking. The moon in Aquarius is like, it's very much the everyman. And then Mars in Libra can be like also sort of a chip on your shoulder. Whenever there's a planet in detriment, it's like a chip on your shoulder. You're developing this sort of overcoming something related to it.
No one talks more shit than the Philadelphia Eagles fans, that's for sure. And everyone from Philadelphia acts like they have a chip on their shoulder. So I don't know. I'm sure Ricky has experienced, what it's like to play at an Eagles game, but I can't imagine it's a delightful experience.
They seem fun.
Yeah, I mean, in the natal chart, the Saturn opposing Mercury, the shit talking. But so aside from the Super Bowl, just really thinking of, I think, how teams could go about considering finding which players to draft is finding players that have strong resonance with their natal chart. And one of the things we saw in Jalen Hurts' chart that I pointed out was in his chart he had the Uranus sun, okay? And And so we see in Eagles chart that Jalen's sun, I think it's 15 degrees Leo, okay, right here opposing their Saturn. And he had his moon in Aquarius here at like 10 degrees and Neptune right at 0 degrees. So we see compatibility. We see a resonance between Jalen and the Eagles. Okay. I think that means he's their guy for the future is the way I would say it. As far as this year, I don't see enough. And again, we don't know houses, so I can't see stimulus to the 10th house ruler, but I don't see enough activity, energy hitting the sun in this chart.
So probably not going to be them.
well, that's...
We're jumping ahead. So let's just look at the Chiefs founding chart. So they're a little bit interesting. They actually started as the Texans, and then they moved to Kansas City in 1963, but we're still going to look at when this team specifically was founded, and that was in 1959.
So their sun is in Leo, their moon is in Capricorn. Mercury stationed direct one day after it was founded, or the team was founded in Leo, and they're currently in a 4th house year. The 4th house is a year of endings, year of beginnings. It's a year of really getting to the root. It's their solar opposition, so that's, being in the spotlight. The Saturn is also, it's interesting, I guess, there's so much Aquarian, at least for both teams, like Philly having their moon in Aquarius and with the sun and Saturn there, and then the Chiefs being a Leo sun, especially with Mercury retrograde. Mercury retrograde in Leo is not as much shit talking as much as it's that they're really going to be defending themselves against any shit talking, I suppose. It's also their Mercury opposition, so they have Mercury and then Saturn sort of like, I feel like this is like a game where they will be learning, of course, but they've already learned so much to get there. Maybe this will be like the time, like, I don't know. I just feel like the sun in Leo against Saturn in Aquarius is so like ready to shine. Every Leo sun, Leo placements are like, I've like learned so much. Like I've really been through it, and sort of like anything a Leo can be proud of is like, they're going to be like, it's sort of like, yeah, I went through all this bullshit and I'm done and I'm here and I'm ready to play.
Yeah. So kind of based on what I said about the Eagles chart, I look at this chart and I'm looking for stimulus to the natal sun. All right. And progress Uranus moves super slow, but it gives me a little bit there. The transiting sun, okay, is giving a little bit of energy, not so much. So I see there's definitely more stimulus here. I also looked at Jupiter. Natal Jupiter at 23 degrees Scorpio is receiving a sextile from transiting Neptune. Right. So I see a lot more energy, a lot more juice. And a theme that keeps coming up over and over again is transiting Uranus. So transiting Uranus here at 15 degrees, squaring the natal Uranus here. And I mentioned it with the Eagles chart and with Jalen Hurts is the theme. And earlier today, I was sitting outside and I was thinking about this interview. And I said, I want to do an orrery chart for the game, because it popped into my consciousness about who's gonna win. And as I did it, it was right before, like, a couple moons at 15 degrees Leo, the sun, I think, at 16 degrees now, right on this axis, And so my sense is it's going to be a crazy game, maybe a whole lot of lead changes, but we can expect to see Uranus in full force.
I love that.
In this game.
At least it'll be a fun game then. I mean, not for the players, but for people watching.
We've seen a lot of boring ass Super Bowls.
Have we?
One that comes to mind is the Super Bowl that we had to endure as Bears fans, when it was like super exciting with Devin Hester in the beginning, and then like they didn't score the whole time and it was just like a blowout and it was so boring. So I'm excited to hear, Ricky, that you don't think this is going to be a blowout one way or the other. It's going to be an exciting game. So we're fucking pumped for that. So if you had to pick, based on all these charts we looked at 6 charts, we looked at Jalen Hurts, we looked at Patrick Mahomes, the Kelsey brothers, we looked at the team charts. If you had to give your pick, what would it be? Which team?
It's funny. The first thing the caveat I have to make is when Uranus is around, it's the trickster. So you have to expect the unexpected. Okay. And from what I can tell, based on my system of what has the most energy, I'm going with the Chiefs.
You heard it
That's
here
what
first,
I was
you guys.
thinking.
Ricky Williams is going with the Chiefs. Dana also agrees. Which is important to note, I guess. And so we're excited to see if this is correct. But we're going to have a game with a lot of energy. and we'll see who pulls through. But it's going to be, I think, big and exciting for all involved. But we cannot end this episode with that prediction. We need to talk about one more winner, hopefully, of this Super Bowl, and that is Rihanna.
Yes, she is performing for the first time in what seems like eternity. Normally, also, it's important to note, I'm an advertiser. Super Bowl for me is my event of the year in my industry. And it's important to say that the halftime show, for the first time again in what seems like since the dawn of time, is not put on by Pepsi, but it is put on by Apple Music. So it might be more aggressive in a good way.
Aggressive. Pepsi is a very conservative company. Traditionally, there's a lot of shit that they don't let artists do. So I'm curious to see how this sort of maybe redefines what a Super Bowl halftime performance is. Rihanna hasn't put out an album since 2016. We got a ballad from her last year, but that's not what we want from Rihanna. So this is a big deal. So what's going on with her transits at this performance, Dana?
She is in an 11th house year, and her 11th house is Aquarius, and she has
11th house of audience.
Right. And her natal Mercury retrograde is there. So that's loud, especially with all the Aquarius transits going on, including Saturn, Sun, and Mercury. So it's the beginning of her Mercury return. But also her progressed Mercury, or her progressed midheaven, is conjunct her natal Mercury. Her natal Mercury is at 13 degrees. Her progressed midheaven's at 14. So it's sort of like the midheaven being your career, your reputation, sort of like where you were seen in public. That's pretty spot on. But also, Neptune is conjunct her natal north node. So I wonder if even she knows what's going to happen next, or if she's just sort of going with the flow and feeling it out as much as we are. I love her so much. So I'm so excited. This is the most exciting thing that's happened to me, at least performance-wise. And if Frank Ocean drops an album this year too, you guys can bet it'll be over for me in a good way. Also, transiting Jupiter is conjunct her progressed sun. I mean, it's pulling away. Transiting Jupiter is at 8 degrees. Her progressed sun's at 6 degrees Aries. So it's sort of I feel like, Aries being such a, it's where the sun is exalted. It's like the fire sign that's I'm here, I'm ready to try anything. Maybe she'll be experimenting or doing some new stuff. I would love that, personally. What do you guys see?
Yeah, I like the theme of experimentation, since we've been talking about Uranus, and where I can bring Uranus in here is that transiting Uranus squaring her progressed midheaven. And also I'm looking at the Placidus chart, the progressed moon moving through Cancer and the 4th. And this kind of, I think the Cancer, the womb, 4th house, the home, right? And it's not just going there, but it's something is cooking. Okay.
But this is also her first performance as a mother.
Yeah. Here we go. Exactly. Wow.
Cancer, womb, mother.
That's so beautiful.
This is going to be really cool. This is actually this is a very exciting. So obviously I'm hoping we hear, I don't know if this will be new music or what, but I think we're all going to be able to be winners with this halftime performance.
Expect it to be heartfelt, is what I'd say.
Oh,
heartfelt.
I love that. I think so, too.
I will probably cry.
All right. I will cry. I think I'll cry.
I think it'll be a little nostalgic, too, because, again, 4th house Cancer. Yeah.
But anyway, Ricky, we've held your time for long enough, but we are so grateful that you joined us. We would love to know, where can people find you on the internet? Do you have any announcements about the Leela app we can look forward to? Would love to know where people can connect with you.
Yeah, so Leela, we just released transits, which I'm really excited
Hell
about.
Yeah.
So really excited, and we're working on relationships. We're working on improving the My Profile section. So we're just know that it's we love the writing, we love what we're doing, and we're constantly working to keep improving. So
it's an excellent
check it
app.
out, and please give us.
I endorsed it long before we had this partnership.
All right, Ricky. Well, thank you. This is the best. We'll put in links to Ricky's socials and the Leela app, but we're really excited, and we hope you guys learned a lot from this episode, as Ricky's a wealth of knowledge, so we're so thrilled to have you on here.
Yeah, Gemini, amazing.
Knowledge, Gemini. Hell yeah. All right. Well, thank you, Ricky.
Thank you guys for listening to this episode. And if you want to help support and grow the podcast, you can subscribe to our Patreon. For $5 a month, you get at least 2 extra episodes.
And if you want to help us out even more, you could leave us a 5-star review and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts.
And if you leave us a review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify and DM us a screenshot of that review, we'll make you a custom meme of your big three and send you a quick write-up about it.
Definitely do that. I'm truly gifted at making these memes. We also have cool Allegedly Astrology merch for all signs on TeePublic, so go there and check it out.
And make sure you follow us on social media. We're Allegedly Astrology on Instagram, Reddit, Hey Hero, and TikTok, and Allegedly Astro on Twitter.
And you can visit our website, allegedlyastrology.com, to learn more about us and the show, book a reading with me, Dana, and check out charts and transcripts for select episodes.
I'm Elise.
I'm Dana.
And I'm Sarah.
And this is Allegedly Astrology.